Hello, and welcome to the launch of the New York Innovation Center, a strategic partnership between the Federal Reserve Bank of New York and the Bank for International Settlements Innovation Hub. My name is Elizabeth Mahoney, and I will be your host today. Before we get started, I'd like to go over our program. To begin, we will hear remarks from President John Williams and Chair Jerome Powell of the Federal Reserve, followed by BIS General Manager Augustine Carstens. After these remarks, we will move to a panel discussion, which will be moderated by New York Fed First Vice President Noreen Hassan. Noreen will introduce our panelists. There will be an opportunity to ask questions during the panel discussion. So let's begin. It's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, John Williams, President and Chief Executive Officer of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. John, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth, and welcome to everybody for this launch of the New York Innovation Center. It's an exciting day for us here at the New York Fed, the Federal Reserve System, and I think for everyone in the BIS Innovation Hub network. Going back a few years, I'm sure Augustine Carstens will talk about this in his remarks, the BIS created this international collaboration to bring the best ideas and the best thinking around innovation to help central banks carry out their responsibilities and to tackle some problems in the global financial system. And we're proud that the New York Fed is representing the Federal Reserve System as the host of the New York Innovation Center. Of course, the United States is famous for being the center and host of a lot of innovation in the private sector around fintech, more generally around technology and innovation. And so I think it makes a lot of sense to for us and the Federal Reserve to really be working closely with the innovative sector and the private sector along with the BIS Innovation Hub centers. Of course, New York in particular is a center of a web of innovation that includes the financial sector and fintech and a lot of technology companies. So what we're looking to do is take our unique position here in the Federal Reserve and in New York Fed to bridge the innovation sector with the BIS Innovation Hub centers around the world and to partner with our colleagues across the Federal Reserve System, the BIS, and many others. A key objective for us is to go beyond innovation just for our own sake and really create value for the broader central bank community. Now, that said, an important part of our focus will be addressing issues that are particular to our part of the world, for example, cross-border payments, and we'll be applying what we learn and what we develop to our own work. To me, what's truly exciting about the center is this is a model about doing and thinking differently than we've done in the past. Now, obviously, we pride ourselves of, technology is a big part of our work around payments, around monetary policy, supervision, and all other responsibilities, but really bringing the best innovative thinking and process to what we do. And the BIS Innovation Hub has really put that out as a challenge for us and also objective. We'll have a very different mindset in how we approach things. This is not a business as usual enterprise for us at all. And we're looking to experiment in new ways as we go about this work. We're looking to work faster and also directly or quickly creating prototypes and solutions. And really the goal here is not just to write down ideas, but to develop them, turn them into practice and experiment and see what works. And of course, it's a model that throughout is fueled by collaboration between here at the Federal Reserve, with the private sector, with our peer institutions around the world, and with others who are working together on these important issues. So again, this is a very exciting time for us here at the New York Fed, and I'm looking forward to working closely with the Center's Director, Per Fonselowitz, and his team, as well as leaders and colleagues in all of our partner institutions as we begin to make progress on our areas of focus and the collective mission. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Elizabeth, for our next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, President Williams. And now we will hear from Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell.
Good afternoon. It is a pleasure to welcome everyone, including colleagues from the BIS and in particular from the BIS Innovation Hub, to the opening of the New York Innovation Center. The pace of technological change and innovation over the last decade has led some to argue that we're on the brink of a fourth industrial revolution, a digital revolution. Certainly, rapid innovation, including through the application of advanced digital technologies, machine learning, artificial intelligence, and big data, is revolutionizing the financial sector. The Federal Reserve has a mandate to understand and, in some cases, manage these changes. But it also has a responsibility to be at the forefront of change to deliver to the American people and the international community a reliable, efficient, and inclusive monetary and financial system. Furthering the efforts around the Federal Reserve System to harness the power of innovation, I'm delighted to welcome the opening of the New York Innovation Center. Located at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, in the heart of the most important financial center in the world, this Innovation Center will draw on the expertise at the bank, in the Federal Reserve System, and from the broader financial community, as well as experts around the world to analyze and bring technology to bear on improving the global financial system. Increasing the synergies of the New York Innovation Center will be its strategic partnership with the BIS Innovation Hub, recently established to foster dialogue, collaboration, and knowledge sharing among central banks and other authorities and institutions. In particular, the partnership will support our analysis of digital currencies, including central bank digital currencies, help to improve our current payment system, with a particular focus on making cross-border payments faster and less expensive, and it will provide new tools to aid our supervision of the financial system. Linking up with the BIS in this way will enhance our ability to collaborate with central banks around the world and will ensure that the best and most up-to-date information, research, and practices are flowing freely. Since its inception in January 2020, I've served as head of the BIS Innovation Hub Advisory Committee, and I'm very pleased that the Federal Reserve will be able to partner with the Hub in this important way. So I want to extend my thanks to President Williams, Augustin Carstens, and all those that worked on the establishment of the Center. And I look forward to the advances of both of these institutions in supporting innovation in service to the safety and soundness of the financial system. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Powell. And now I'd like to turn to BIS General Manager Augustin Carstens.
Good evening for us here in Basel. It is a great pleasure for me to join you today for the launch of the New York Innovation Center. Let me thank John and his team for their excellent collaboration with the BIS in making the strategic partnership a reality. And thank you for organizing this wonderful event. I would like also to thank Chair Powell for his kind words and his invaluable contribution to the Hub as chair of its advisory committee. And let me also congratulate Chair Powell on his nomination for a second term leading the Federal Reserve Board. The global economy will benefit from his calm and steady leadership in the days ahead. Together, the BIS and the Federal Reserve System are building a solid foundation for collaboration at a moment when technology is transforming finance and our everyday lives. The pandemic has simply turbocharged this transformation. Think of payments. The use of cash was already declining before the pandemic, but the fear that banknotes could actually transmit COVID has led to a significant increase in the use of mobile payments and a boom in e-commerce. Think of the explosive growth of data and how big techs exploit this data. Big techs combine their enormous store of customer data with algorithms, artificial intelligence, and machine learning to reduce the need for collateral when providing credit to their customers. Think of cryptocurrencies, the rapid rise of decentralized finance, or DeFi, and digital ID systems using biometric data. I could go on and on. These developments tell us a story of a rapidly evolving world where new technologies can promote greater efficiency, financial stability, and inclusion. But these technologies can also spawn financial instability, the loss of privacy, and financial exclusion. To foster the power of innovation while preserving the best elements of the current financial system, central banks need to explore new worlds inhabited by software engineers, cloud architects, data scientists, cryptography experts, and social science experts. This may sound surprising for those, and there are many, who think of central banks as bastions of conservatism. But the truth is that central banking has always been inextricably linked to innovation, and this is particularly true for the BIS. As the world's oldest international financial organization, innovation has always been part of the BIS DNA. Since its establishment in 1930, the BIS has been the principal forum for collaboration among central banks globally. We cooperate on many activities that contribute to monetary and financial stability, which are essential for sustained economic growth. So, it is only natural that our work now extends into the area of innovation and technology. That is the role of the BIS Innovation Hub, which was established in 2019 to be a focal point for central bank collaboration on innovation. The Hub works with central banks, international organizations, and private sector partners on the development of cutting-edge technology. It solves practical problems with new technologies and develops public goods that improve the functioning of the global financial system. The Hub is not a think tank, it is a laboratory. It builds proofs of concept and prototypes using new technologies. It organizes hackathons to engage with the fintech community, scout technologies, and source ideas for projects. Over the last 2 years, we have taken significant strides with our centers in Switzerland, Hong Kong, and Singapore. Last June, we opened centers in the UK and in Sweden, and we look forward to opening new centers with the Eurosystem and in Canada. The Hub is leading projects related to SupTech and RegTech, next-generation financial market infrastructures, central bank digital currencies, open finance, cybersecurity, and green finance. Let me give you some examples. Project Rio in our Swiss center explores how central banks can use cloud-based data streaming technologies to monitor fast-paced FX markets. Project Genesis in our Hong Kong center demonstrates how tokenization can help develop green bond markets. It has built digital platforms that bring to life the vision of retail investors downloading an app to invest any amount into safe government bonds whose proceeds are used to finance a green project. Project Nexus in our Singapore center builds on multilateral platform that links together national fast payment systems at scale. In the Nexus prototype, fast payments infrastructures in multiple countries are linked to enable real-time multi-currency cross-border transactions. The platform has the potential to promote interoperability between fast payment systems and foster innovation on a global basis. The BIS Innovation Hub is exploring the use of wholesale CBDCs to improve cross-border payments between financial institutions, and work is also ongoing on retail CBDCs. Through these projects, we are learning a lot about technology and how it can make the financial system more efficient. We have also come to appreciate the power of collaboration in the innovation space. Central banks can accomplish so much more when they work together than they can individually. That is why our strategic partnership with the Federal Reserve System is so important. The launch of the New York Innovation Center today will take our collaboration on innovation with the Federal Reserve System to a new level. It is an important milestone for the Innovation Hub and the BIS. We look forward to working with the New York Fed on innovation. As noted by John, the collaboration will enable us to benefit from the Federal Reserve's expertise in innovation and the vibrant fintech ecosystem that exists in New York and the United States. It will also allow the BIS to contribute its global perspective to the work of the New York Innovation Center. We are delighted to add John Perfon-Selowitz and the New York Fed team to our growing family and look forward to the days ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you, General Manager Karstens. And now we're ready to move on to our panel discussion. And it's with great pleasure that I introduce the first Vice President of the New York Fed, Noreen Hassan. Noreen?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here today. As you heard from our speakers, this launches the next big and important step for the center. There has been a tremendous amount of work to get the center stood up and positioned for success. Part of that work has been to identify the center's mission and opportunity areas, and we're excited to share those more widely and for the work to get underway. For the remainder of today's event, we'll have a panel discussion to highlight the importance of innovation for the central bank community and the financial service sectors, the value of the strategic partnership between the BIS and the New York Fed, and the high impact opportunity for the New York Innovation Center. We are honored to be joined today by Benoit Cœuré, the head of the BIS Innovation Hub. Benoit was the catalyst behind setting up an innovation center at the Federal Reserve and has been a valuable partner for us. We are also pleased to welcome Amy Nouriakis and Raj Seshadri to offer their perspectives from the private sector. Amy is the founder and CEO of Anthemis, a fintech investment platform. Raj is the president of Data and Services at MasterCard, a global technology company we all know in the payments industry. And we're also joined by Per von Zelowitz, the center's director here in New York. He's been an incredible force in it all, and I'm sure he will share more about the work and his vision in our discussion. I'm going to get started with some questions for our panelists, but feel free for those of you on the WebEx to add questions into the Q&A box, and I will take those as we go as well. So Benoit, I'm going to start with you. The idea for the New York Innovation Center originated from the BIS Innovation Hub. Could you share some background on the BIS Innovation Hubs and how you've been progressing since your launch in 2019 and how your work led to the forming of the New York Innovation Center?
Thank you, Noreen, and let me start by saying how it is very good to be with you today. We want the New York Innovation Center to be part of family from the BIS standpoint, and it's already feeling like family. So thank you very much for this event. We've created the BIS Innovation Hub at the end of 2019, which is 2 years ago, and I think it's fair to say that we've taken great strides to make it happen and deliver on the mandate which was given to us by the global central banking community, which, as Agustin explained earlier on, is about providing central bank with a platform where they can team up and work together to deliver public goods. As of today, the Innovation Hub has 5 centers in Hong Kong, Singapore, and Switzerland, and more recently, we've opened centers in London and Stockholm. We've appointed leadership in these new centers and are starting to populate them with projects. We've developed 11 projects across the centers, across the full range of topics which Agustin mentioned earlier. Central bank digital currency, of course, but also RegTech, SubTech, next generation financial market infrastructures, green finance, importantly, and so on. And we've built partnerships with a large number of central banks, and I can come back to that later in the discussion. And what we do, as Agustin said, is we are not a research center, we're not a think tank. We do prototypes, we do proofs of concepts. Sometimes they could evolve into minimum viable products for our community. We also do hackathons, long and short, and so on, to leverage our capability and also to understand more about the areas we've been asked to investigate. What the idea of the partnership with New York actually came quite naturally. I mean, it only felt right for us to work with the Federal Reserve System, given not only the strength of the fintech ecosystem, not only in New York, but also elsewhere in the US, and also the exciting projects that are being developed across the system. When we learned about the Innovation Center project, it was really a meeting of minds, and it only became natural that we would build this strategic partnership where we can develop our own projects and also choose a number of projects we can develop together. And it's not only about projects. I very much expect that it's also going to be about human capital, staff, exchanges of staff between the New York Center and the Innovation Hub, not only in Basel, but also across the different centers. So it's all very exciting for us, and we very much look forward for the cooperation. And I would again like to thank Chair Powell and President Williams for their leadership, which has allowed this to come to life today.
Great, thank you very much. Perry, it feels like a natural transition to you, and to specifically talk about the New York Innovation Center and what are the objectives for our specific locality, and then how does it tie into the rest of the Federal Reserve System?
Thanks, Noreen. The objective of the New York Innovation Center is to provide an innovation execution capability, not just to the New York Fed, but also the entire Federal Reserve System. And I emphasize execution specifically at the start of my comments. Our focus is to solve important problems and generate high impact opportunities for the central bank community through experimentation, but also deliver software and services solutions that effectively address the targeted problems that we're focused on. Our approach includes utilizing effective and efficient product innovation methodologies, including a venture studio model that are tailored for the type of organization that we are and the specific objectives that we have. Ultimately, if you distill our focus and our objectives down, we're about converting insight into tangible solutions for the central bank community. Following on to the second part of your question, since I joined the Federal Reserve or the New York Fed, I should say, about 4 months ago, one of the observations that I've had is that there's exciting innovation taking place all across the Federal Reserve System. We're but one of a number of innovation initiatives that are taking place, and we're really designed to provide a complementary and collaborative capability relative to all of the other innovation that's taking place today. So if you think about some of the interesting aspects and examples of innovation taking place across the Federal Reserve System today, it includes work going on at the Federal Reserve Board level with groups like the Tech Lab. It involves work going on with the System Chief Innovation Officer and also other reserve banks. So Project Hamilton at the Boston Fed would be one example. We're in constant communication with all these other groups to understand how we can work together, ultimately to deliver high impact outcomes from the innovation work that's taking place today.
Thanks. I want to shift to to Amy and Raj to ask you for advice for us. I'll start with Amy, but Raj, feel free to chime into this. As we get started, could you share some perspectives, from your opinion, for the central bank community to accelerate our innovation centers? We would love to learn from the private sector. Are there methodologies, tools, lessons learned that can inform what we do here with the New York Innovation Center? Amy,
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, I mean, look, I'm incredibly encouraged to hear the level of enthusiasm and conviction around the topic of innovation that I'm hearing kind of from the top of the discussion today. I'm actually even more encouraged to know that both of the themes that I was going to talk about today have already been spoken about in multitudes, right? It's about collaboration and it's about execution. And to me, that is by far the most important part of true innovation. And, look, as someone who's been literally in what we are now collectively calling the fintech world for over 30 years, well before it was cool, I can tell you that the efforts like the New York Innovation Center are precisely right on time. There should be no concern, if there is any, doesn't sound like there is, that this is, coming late or sort of, kind of running up behind. Anyone who truly appreciates and understands the financial system knows that this game is long. It's not counted in years, but in decades, and in some cases, centuries. And we are just still at the very beginning of how the digitization of our global financial system is going to unfold. There's huge opportunity, right? And while there have been many of us clamoring around for decades now on how this will affect our financial system and predicting market and consumer trends, right? That's our job as investors. We're supposed to have been there decades before anybody else. Otherwise, there's no way for the private sector to make money. And there's plenty of folks inside of the incumbent community. I will not put MasterCard necessarily in this case, because I think you guys have been doing a great job, who over the last couple of, last decade have made fairly lofty and quite considered statements about how and where to innovate. But a lot of it isn't much more than sort of marketing and positioning, because a lot of these big organizations aren't set up to innovate. And so what I'm super encouraged about hearing is that you guys are recognizing that you have to do things a little bit differently, right? So when I think about lessons learned from the private sector, my instinct is to push you to commit and to remain collaborative, but most importantly, consider who you're collaborating with. Open up the conversation. Don't assume it's the big banks and the large incumbents or the sort of folks that have always been your partners. Look to this world, kind of this new guard of voices of the future. Lean into the investment platforms and the thousands of startups and find a way to convene and converse in that community. The power is shifting in the private sector very, very really, and you need to lean into that. And I'm also encouraged that power shift does include that the people that are getting their hands on some of the capital that are driving trends in the private sector are looking slightly different than they have in the past. And so I encourage you as well to kind of consider, a level of diversity, inclusivity into all the thought leadership that you're looking for. Be careful of that clubbiness that can happen in sort of that, sometimes in the central bank community. And there's so many great examples of things that you guys are doing well and quickly, like how quickly some of these rapid adoptions of central bank digital currencies are happening around the world is fantastic, but it's not always the same leaders that are going to be coming up with the new ideas, right? I think we appreciate that sometimes it takes those who are more threatened and have more to lose to come up with innovation. And so recognizing that the sort of economies that have led the innovation in the past might not be those who lead it in the future. And then the final thing I'd say, which I'm super, super bullish on, is not to try to boil the ocean, right? Do this in a new way. Use, we've been very successful with these concepts of sandboxes, where you're actually just taking small experimented projects that are controllable and in some cases low risk, as opposed to that usual kind of overthinking lumbering project with endless theorizing and consensus building and nothing actually happens. And that, this initiative is designed, from what I can tell, to ignore some of that stuff. You really just need to dig in and try some stuff and see what happens.
Amy, that's a great description of how we're trying this, which and just the BIS model more broadly, which is do something small, experiment, learn, versus trying to do something big and get everybody on board first and really, big bang it. So really agree with your points there. Raj, I want to shift to you. So you're taking the incumbent seat from Amy's perspective. Where do you think the opportunities are for us in the central bank perspective? What are the key trends that are shaping the financial services industry over the next few years that we really need to insert ourselves into?
Thank you, Noreen. It's an honor to be here and excited about this New York Innovation Center. And Amy, thank you for saying we're, we call ourselves a big fintech. So we don't think of ourselves as an incumbent as much as a very innovative place. It's an interesting question, Noreen. I think just building on what Amy was saying, critical to innovation is really identifying and understanding and staying ahead of the trends, which is the question you asked me about. That is totally the most important thing to do. And within that, also understanding what is relevant to the ecosystem you're thinking about. So for example, for MasterCard, it's things like cybersecurity or analytics, AI, Internet of Things, for sure, digital currencies, things like that. So what's relevant? And then the other dimension is what can you take that way you can create new, meet a need that you haven't met before, or meet a need that is just emerging based on sort of what is possible today versus what was possible yesterday. So, that's the way we think about it. So last year we created the MasterCard Economics Institute, which has been, one of our innovations in this pandemic, to work with central banks as well as with, banks, merchants, various other ecosystem partners to think about what can be done in the short term and in the long term based on our insights. So I'll give you 5 trends, right? I can probably give you 15 if we had plenty of time, but I'll give you the 5 that, pop to mind as I think about the work that we've been doing during the pandemic. The first is the shift to digital. Shift to digital accelerated in the pandemic. There's no question about that. In fact, we're just releasing our spending pulse, consumer spending numbers over Thanksgiving, today. And what you'll see is that it confirms that the pandemic is accelerated digital. So we see, in-store going up this year because last year it was depressed. But frankly, digital is also going up. And in our point of view, as we look forward, I think 20 or 30% of the shift to e-commerce is here to stay. So there is this shift to digital that is in our future. And digital and physical, it's not digital or physical anymore. It's digital and physical. The two are intertwined. Related to that is the second trend, where to meet this, we see new infrastructures, new options, new habits forming. So as an example, small businesses, what we saw in 2020 is they rapidly went online. Month on month, we almost saw a tripling of small businesses going online, peaking at about July of 2020. And we still see that trend continuing. And what's important is the ones that went digital or went online are the ones that are disproportionately the ones that have thrived and survived. So the infrastructures in companies, in society is changing rapidly. The third is the importance of choice. As this evolves and as there are more options, take payments, for example, whether it's people, whether it's businesses, choice is important. There's some things that are more appropriate or apropos for certain situations, and you want that consumer to have that choice. So choice matters. The fourth I'll point to is agility. We all got more agile in the pandemic, right? We're doing this virtually today. That agility doesn't end here. I think it accelerates over the next 5 years. You're seeing it with buy now, pay later and cryptocurrency and CBDCs and some of the things we're talking about. That agility and the ability to think differently and constantly challenge ourselves, I think, continues well past the pandemic. And then the fifth one I'll give you is consumer expectations. We all know this from ourselves, right? From what we do ourselves and what we expect. Consumers are expecting speed and simplicity, personalization, contextualization based on who we are as individuals, but within the context of making sure our data is safe, our privacy and identities are guarded, and things are secure. So within the parameters of those principles, our expectations for individuality, for unique experiences is higher today than ever before. So those are 5 trends, and I would say there's more opportunity in them. You may view them as a challenge, but for all of us, there's more opportunity in them than challenges.
Raj, I think, in reflecting on your comments, first of all, I'm the former Chief Digital Officer of Morgan Stanley, so I was really excited to hear your first couple of comments. But I'd say, where we're good just as an industry is we're very good domestically. But where I think that the big opportunity is, and particularly for those of us in the public sector, is how do we make it as easy internationally as it is within our own borders from that customer experience perspective. And on that note, Per, I'm going to ask you the next question, which is, what do you see as the role of the public sector in this evolving landscape? And how does the BIS Innovation Hub and the New York Innovation Center fit into this?
Great, thanks, Noreen. And that's a really important question. And I appreciate your comments, in particular around agility. So the public sector has a critical role to play really in this landscape. So if you think about all the trends that Raj, you mentioned, those are the same trends that are affecting the public sector and also the public sector's customers. So there's people all around the world, obviously, that rely on the products and services that the public sector provides and the overall value proposition that we support. So the public sector is another critical actor. It's another key component and node in the network that ultimately creates the value propositions that we're focused on. And we need to collaborate specifically with other public sector institutions like the BIS and BIS Innovation Hub, and also the private sector. So organizations like Anthemis and MasterCard in order to ultimately ensure that when we do create the next generation products and services that are serving our customers and serving our stakeholders, we're delivering the highest impact value propositions that we can. So we can do that through collaboration, through experimentation, so that ultimately when we try and solve the big important problems that we're focused on, we're ultimately delivering the most effective solutions at the end of the day. So I see the public sector really as just another critical component, a critical partner, and ultimately the delivery of these next generation products and services that we're focused on.
Thanks. Benoit, there's a question in the chat that I think ties in, which is, can you give examples of notable execution on smaller, more focused projects? And so the BIS Innovation Hubs around the world have been going since 2019. Can you talk about some of the projects that have been happening in those other hubs and the impact that they've had?
Yeah, thank you, Noreen. That's a really good question, and it ties with what with the advice Amy was giving us earlier, which I could really strongly relate to. And this notion that when you experiment, small is beautiful, and you don't want to boil the ocean. And you want to start small, and then you see if it works, or if you fail. If you fail, you start something different, and if it works, you can build on it, but step by step. And well, to give you an example, we know that CBDC is a very hot topic in the central banking community. Our aim is not to build a CBDC architecture. That wouldn't make sense from a BIS perspective because it's so national. It's so rooted in national laws, national preferences about privacy, different financial structures, different roles for banks and non-banks, and so on and so forth. So we don't want to go there. We want to test. We want to answer to problem statements that the central banks are putting to us, and it has to be small. So one example is settlement. We have this project called Jura between with the Swiss National Bank and also now with the Banque de France. And we're answering a very simple question, which is how do you settle a digital asset on a blockchain in central bank money? And it's a very, very focused question, and we've looked at different ways to answer it. You may want to settle your assets using central bank money that you want to push on the blockchain. So, and that's wholesale central bank currency, a central bank token, if you want. You may want to settle your transaction using some kind of messaging to the RTGS system, and that would be the traditional way to settle. And if it's a cross-border transaction, it kind of multiplies the number of options that you have. And we've been looking through all these options, and within in a few days, next week actually, we'll publish the report that just goes through the option, compares the pros and cons, and so on and so forth. So that's the kind of things we're doing, looking at a very, very specific question which central banks are asking, which is kind of similar across the central banking community to help them move faster. And maybe to be more comprehensive, we've also tried to do that with as many partners as possible. We are really trying to follow Amy's advice that we should be broadening the conversation to players which are not the natural interlocutors of central banks. So we want to reach out to the DeFi community, for instance, and understand what they're doing. We're not regulators, so it might be easier for us to do that. We just want to learn from them, what they're doing, how it works, and how we can connect their world with our world, and what are the technological options. And we're also working with a number of central banks around the world, even beyond the central banks that are host to Innovation Hub centers. So if you take all multiple CBDC platforms being currently considered by the Innovation Hub, we have 10 central banks as partners in total around our projects. In Hong Kong, we have HKMA, of course, we have Thailand, we have the Emirates, and we have the People's Bank of China. In Singapore, we have the Reserve Bank of Australia, we have the Central Bank of Malaysia, we have the MAS, of course, and we have the South African Reserve Bank. And as I said, in Switzerland, we work with the SNB and also with the Banque de France. So, to put it simply, we really want to broaden the conversation as much as we can.
Yeah, that's a good translation. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Amy.
No, I was just going to add, Noreen, because you encouraged us to jump in. It's just occurring to me that Benoit, there's a really unique opportunity here in New York, particularly in the US or New York specifically, that I'm part of a larger ecosystem at Anthemis. It's about 10,000 people wide. And it's occurring to me that in my experience so far, in my 30 years, I haven't ever met Raj or Noreen. And that to me feels like you've already tapped into the ability to convene a different crew of people to have a conversation. And I think it'd be quite wonderful to use some of the efforts of what you guys are doing to be a catalyst for those conversations, right? Because I think it's easier for you to bring people from various different worlds together to have these conversations than it is for us from inside the world to then say, hey, we'd love to meet this person or that person. And you seem to have done it already on your first initial way out the door. So I think that could be a really exciting way to progress.
I agree. I think we have an important role as that convener of the conversation, particularly, as we can do more things in person, hopefully soon. We shall see. Per, I want to follow on Benoit's point. He was talking about the projects that are happening across the other centers. Can you talk specifically about New York? We have a question here. What types of projects will be the focus of the New York Innovation Center?
Great, thanks, Noreen. So Amy and Benoit set the stage very nicely with their comments around the importance of focus. And that's a critical success factor for us. So the problem that we have today isn't having too little areas of interest, but it's really having too many exciting things that we could potentially spend time on and work on. So for us to be successful, we really need to narrow it down to a subset that we think are ultimately the highest impact and are going to be the areas where we can deliver the most value through our experimentation and through the work that we're performing. So to that end, we've defined 5 opportunity areas that will be the start of our work. These are really the themes that we'll focus on, the areas that we'll invest our time and energy and resources into. And number 1 is supervisory technology and regulatory technology. So clearly, the supervision responsibility is a key activity of the Federal Reserve. And there's really a great opportunity to do that in a more effective way, both from our perspective, but also relative to the organizations that we supervise today. So if you think about advances in product design, advanced data analytics, artificial intelligence, these sorts of characteristics, there's simply much more we could do and probably much better relative to that category than we are today. Number 2 are financial market infrastructures. So this category really relates to the enterprise technology that's specific to activities like payments and settlements, trading systems, those sorts of things. This is particularly interesting from the perspective of the New York Fed and New York in general, where these types of activities are core to the work that we do. And some of the most interesting innovation that's taking place today is really happening within this geography. So it's a neat opportunity for us, given our location and given the other organizations that are also in this area. Number 3 is what we call the future of money. So this relates to all of the digital currency related work that we'll focus on. So you heard Benoit mention central bank digital currencies. This is a critical area of focus for us also, but could also include work specific to stable coins, cryptocurrencies, and other areas that might be relevant from our perspective and for the central bank community. Number 4 is what we call open finance. Open finance contains all of the work that's related to new bank and non-bank financial institutions that are benefiting from new business and operating models, such as banking as a service, open banking, open data, decentralized finance or DeFi, and others. So these are important areas for the Federal Reserve to understand what's taking place, what is the evolution of financial services relative to these new types of models. And even if some of these new organizations that are launching in market today aren't currently supervised or we don't have a relationship with them, they may be supervised in the future and we may have a relationship with them in the future. So there's a critical need for us to understand and have a point of view of what's taking place in this area. And then the final category is climate risk. And our focus on climate will really be one specific to utilizing more advanced data analytics to understand more accurate and more true cost of the climate change that's taking place today. So these are the 5 opportunity areas that we've defined and that we'll focus on today. And also Raj's earlier comment about agility, I'll just respond to that again, where although these are the 5 that we're starting out on, the pace of change has never been faster. Things are happening all the time, and it's highly likely that these will evolve over time also as the market changes and there are new areas of need and new high impact opportunities for us.
Thanks. I'm going to open this up to all of you, but there's a theme of questions here on how should the public sector collaborate with the private sector? And do you have suggestions for how we should do this? Specifically, one person asked, well, it's easy if you're a global tier 1 bank, but how do we do it more broadly? So, Amy, maybe we'll start with you, but Benoit, I'd love to hear, what other hubs have done, or Raj, your opinions on this as well. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can all do a better job of building that muscle for, getting the right people in a room and having earnest and honest conversations. And so I think it's just, you just do it. I know from an Anthemis perspective, a big part of our job is, of course, deploying capital in support of investing in companies, but equal to that is the time we spend having conversations with all the incumbent insurance companies, all the incumbent financial services organizations, in many cases, some of the regulators across Europe and around the world, and as well some of the biggest fintechs out there. And I think there's probably more that can be done to encourage the public sector in those conversations, because they're not proprietary per se. It's just about getting the right people in the room and having the conversation. And I also think it would be helpful because a lot of the work that you're talking about doing is already being done in other ways. And I think people are quite happy to share a lot of this work, particularly when it's non-combative. And I've never been in a scenario whereby people get into a room and properly workshop or ideate on something and haven't come back with something that's valuable to execute on. So, I mean, it sounds simple, but it's just figuring out how to bring the right people in the rooms and have the conversations. And again, don't boil the ocean.
Yeah, I would say the same thing, which is it's getting the right people in the room. And it's interesting that, many of us haven't connected with each other. Per, Benoit, as you talk about CBDCs and crypto and data analytics and AI, and you talk about, product design, we're doing a lot of this too. So getting together and talking about it, I think, and just getting going on it, it's a good idea. So, take Benoit talking about CBDCs, right? I mean, we support it globally. We're working with many central banks. Each central bank is different. The needs are different. And it's complicated, right? I think Chairman Powell said at some point that it's more about getting it right than doing it fast. I'm paraphrasing. And so, really thinking about, the complexity of it. It's a complex undertaking. Thinking about the roles of the private sector and the public sector. Thinking about interoperability. Thinking about security. Thinking about how can we make it additive versus, just replicating what we already have. All of this can be done together. We can put our heads together and do it. And, it's interesting. Benoit mentioned small and sandbox. It's we have a testing environment that we're working with several central banks with, right? To really think about, how a central bank can issue it, design it, validate use cases, etc. So I'd love to, talk to all of you about it as well. So I'm using that as an example to underscore Amy's point, which is we should just get together and talk about some of these things and see what we can do together and start small.
But when you talk about 4 or 5 agenda, maybe just, and also measuring it as a KPI, making sure that we're actually measuring these conversations and the people that are being spoken to, and that we're mixing up the groups a bit. Even doing that as part of the work of what you're doing at the New York Center would be huge, because I think it keep us all accountable and keep the conversation. I've already flagged that we need to find a person to be our coordinator amongst it, but I think it's a great initiative.
Great. Benoit, I don't know if you had anything to add in terms of how some of the other centers are collaborating and lessons that we can learn from them.
Yeah, I think it has to be a combination of different ways to cooperate. We are partnering with private sector companies on all of our projects, of course. It has to be on a competitive basis. It has to be transparent. So you find the names on our website. You can judge whether it's diverse enough. probably not enough because we're just starting. So as we expand, we want to reach out to a larger number of partners or potential partners. So that's for the projects themselves, but there are different ways to reach out. We have, for some projects, we've created advisory committees where, you know, stakeholders or players which are not part of the project can still have a say, comment, criticize, and also comment on you know, how this would interact with what they're doing, as Raj was suggesting. I mean, how this would interoperate with what they're doing with their own platforms, and so on. It's a role of our center heads to interact with the local fintech community, of course, and they're doing it a lot. We do conferences, we do workshops, we do, as I said, we do hackathons, which are really a nice way to reach out to smaller tech firms. I mean, the big guys are also coming and applying, but we can have very good surprises in terms of smaller firms joining our hackathons and sometimes winning even. And so it has to be a combination, and we have to keep an open mind, and we very much expect that with a larger number of centers across the board and globally, we can really cover a larger part of the fintech universe. We very much count on the New York Center to also help us reach out to the fintech scene in the US and in New York.
Great point. I think we might have lost Raj, but hopefully somebody's getting her back. Hera, there's several questions around, if you were a fintech, how do you reach out and partner with the New York Innovation Center? How do you get involved? Is there going to be a process in place? Themes like that. Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. So I'm really glad you asked that question. Following on some of the earlier comments, collaboration is absolutely a critical success factor for us. So the New York Innovation Center will have a focused team, but the way that we'll really be successful over the long run and specific to the projects that we have is by bringing together the right partners to collaborate on each one of the different opportunities, each one of the different projects that we're executing on. So I'm a big believer in Joy's law. So Bill Joy was one of the founders of Sun Microsystems, and one of the things that he said was many of the smartest people in the world work outside of your organization. So one way to be successful is to try and find them and involve them in the work that you're doing. I view really the New York Innovation Center as a node in a network. So we're a central node in an innovation network, and we'll want to find and collaborate with the subject matter experts who are truly the deep experts in the specific areas that we're focused on. We'll also want to collaborate, for example, with organizations that provide us with execution capabilities. So engineering resources, product development resources that we'll use ultimately to execute and deliver the work that we're focused on doing. So that's a key part of our model. It's critical for our success. And right now, I would keep it super simple. You know, if you're an organization and you think that the work that you're doing is very much in line with one of our opportunity areas, or you think you could contribute effectively to some of the interesting problems that we're trying to solve, please reach out to us. So there's a New York Innovation Center webpage that you can access through the New York Fed website. There's an email there where you can get in touch with us. And I would encourage you simply to reach out, read the information that's on the webpage, try and decide if you think what you're doing is an interesting fit with the work that we're doing, and feel free to reach out. You know, I'd love to talk to you and see if there's the opportunity for us to collaborate and try and solve some of the big interesting problems that we're focused on.
Great, thank you. Raj, I see we got you back. Good to see you again.
Yes.
Since you're back, I'm going to ask you a question, and but everybody else chime in too. One thing we're doing in the New York Innovation Center is building the team. So, you know, any advice to us from a human capital perspective? You know, what is the skills and the mindset that we need to focus on as we build this out? I appreciate your experience and perspective.
Yeah, no, what I would say is, you know, the world around us is changing rapidly. There's so much going on around us, and agility, evolution is key. But at the same time, there's one thing that remains constant, and that's people, right? You know, making sure that you have the right people focusing on it within a company and across, you know, with your partners is really important. And the key to that is what Amy said at the beginning, which is you want diversity of thought. You want people who look, act, think differently from you. So for example, on my global team, I have something like 70 nationalities and 80 languages and all kinds of different skills. It's that blending of that diversity of skills and thinking that is really important, because that's where the ideas come from. And so, as we navigate against, into new spaces like AI or digital or, data or, cybersecurity or CBDCs, this is even more important because that's where the creativity comes from. And so I would say, there are things that we do around people that are important. For example, you want to empower everyone to own their own careers. You want to empower everyone to own their own learning, to think about, to listen and learn from them as to what they need, whether it's wellness or whether it's frankly time for innovation in a virtual world. So which could be, a Flex Friday, or it could be, a half a day off or a full day off at some point. It's important to think through, to really foster innovation and creativity. You want to keep your ears and eyes open and to be able to react and create the opportunities so that the people are empowered to do whatever they need to do to look at problems from different points of view and to create and collaborate together. So I would say, but underscoring all of that is diversity and teamwork.
Great, thank you very much, Amy. Anything you would add from your perspective?
Yeah, I'd say the quickest way to kill diversity is to take a very top-down heavy approach, right? You've got to allow for conversation. You've got to allow for creative flexibility. Diversity has to be everywhere because you're not going to have, the best idea isn't the one that everybody agrees on. And I think just recognizing that, hiring for values really matters to this generation of creative thinkers. And sometimes, particularly if you can't compete on salary or some of the other perks that sort of some organizations can offer these days, I think people are less sensitive to that. I think people really want to know that they're working in concert with people who care about the same things they care about, and that they appreciate what impact they're going to have on the outcome within the work that they do.
Great. On that note, I think we're at time. I want to thank Amy, Benoit, Per, Raj, all of you for joining us and sharing your perspectives. We appreciate it, and thanks for taking the time. Elizabeth?
Thank you, Noreen, and thank you again to all of our panelists. This concludes the launch of the New York Innovation Center. We want to thank all the participants for joining today. Thanks again, and be well.